make of it?
Since it came to me in a dream with someone or some things telling me to do.
Paul Simon was a genius at writing songs, who made American folk music famous all over the world. The train station, the genius behind timeless songs, and the brave musical explorer, who mixed styles to make sounds the world had never heard before. That score is a G #sharp minor. That's lovely. It tastes a bit like Hawaii, but it's nice. But behind those complicated melodies and poetic words was a musician, who had a lot of respect for the artists whose work he used as inspiration for his own. Simon was more than just a singer. He was a musical anthropologist who looked into every style, broke down every arrangement, and learned from the best musicians around the world. When certain bands caught his attention and won his respect, they had a huge impact on his art for decades and pushed him to do his most groundbreaking work. Tonight, we're going to look at the good things about Paul Simon's famous work. The 6 bands that won the top award were chosen based on important finds or musical influences that changed people's lives. Love and respect for art that Paul Simon truly felt. If you think you know what Paul Simon did, you're wrong. Here is the exciting countdown of the 6 bands Paul Simon liked most and the amazing ways their music changed one of the greatest songwriters in history. 6. Those 2 brothers Everly. Paul Simon saw the Everly Brothers as the epitome of everything great about American pop music. There was a musical relationship between them that affected every part of his work. Their smooth vocal harmonies and honest emotions shaped the way he wrote songs and performed them. In his teens, Simon first heard Bye Bye Love on the radio and fell in love with the song. Music historians write about how he became immediately interested in their vocal blend and how he spent countless hours studying their harmonies and phrasing methods. He learned early on how 2 voices could work together to make something bigger than the sum of their parts. Recording engineers who worked with Simon say that his love of the Everly Brothers affected his choice to work with Art Garfunkel as a duo. Studio players say Simon used Everly Brothers arrangements all the time when writing Simon and Garfunkel's vocal parts, building on their techniques to create more complex harmonies. Simon's influence grew when he started writing his own songs that were influenced by the emotional honesty and melodic complexity of the Everly Brothers. Music reviewers said that songs like The Sound of Silence echoed their use of harmony while adding Simon's unique lyrical complexity. Simon made his love for the Everly Brothers public when he asked them to perform at his concerts and called them the greatest harmony singers in the history of popular music. Video from concerts shows how excited he was to share the stage with the artists who inspired him as a child. He treated them with respect, like a student thanking his teachers. Simon's lifelong love of singing, harmony and melodic craft began with the music of the Everly Brothers. This shows that great artists never stop learning from the artists who inspire them. They had an effect on his work, showing that admiring other singers can make art more original instead of less. 5. Lady Smith and Black Mambazo. Lady Smith Black Mambazo showed Paul Simon new ways to make music that he hadn't known were possible. Oh, how their traditional South African harmonies and complicated rhythms changed the way he wrote songs and led him to a new phase of creative exploration that led to some of his most famous work. A friend told Simon about the group's record Inala in the early 1980s, and that's how he first heard of them. Music journalists wrote about how he became immediately interested in their vocal arrangements and how he played their records over and over again while studying their harmonic structures and rhythmic patterns. Studio engineers who saw the collaboration say that Simon had a deep and true respect for Lady Smith Black Mambazo. He insisted on learning their traditional methods instead of just copying their sound. Spending months learning about South African musical practices to fully grasp their artistic setting, the collaboration led to grace, and Lady Smith Black Mambazo's talents took Simon's songwriting to a whole new level. Participants in the recording session talked about how much Simon and the group admired each other and how they could learn from each other's ways of playing music and rhythm. Simon's sincere love for musical discovery and his willingness to leave his comfort zone when moved by great art were shown in this collaboration. His friendship with Lady Smith Black Mambazo showed that real musical admiration can cross cultural lines and open up chances for real artistic growth. These are the Beatles. Paul Simon thought that the Beatles were the best example of how to combine melodic ability with the courage to try new things in popular music. Their innovative approach to writing songs and making changes in the studio made him want to go beyond the limits of traditional folk music and try new things with composition and arrangement. Simon's love for the Beatles started with their early hits and grew a lot during their experimental time. His interest in albums like Rubber Soul and Revolver, where the band's readiness to mix different types of music matched his own desire to discover new things, is described by music historians. According to people who worked with Simon on songs, he watched Beatles arrangements very carefully, looking at how the chords changed and how the lyrics were written. Studio musicians talk about how he used Lennon-McCartney-inspired melodies in his own work while still keeping his own unique style, which is affected by folk music. The effect was clear on Simon and Garfunkel's later albums, which had more complex production and more experimental arrangements that showed what they had learned from listening to Beatles records. Critics of the music said that Sounds of Silence and Parsley Sage there was a clear Beatles impact on Rosemary and Thyme, but Simon still kept his own style. This love for the Beatles' courage as artists made Simon want to explore world music and unusual arrangements on his own during his solo career. Their work showed that popular music could be both financially successful and artistically ambitious, which encouraged Simon to work on more complex musical projects. Three Hummingbirds from the Dixie. Paul Simon thought that the spiritual power and vocal quality of the Dixie Hummingbirds were the best things about American music. Their emotional intensity and gospel harmonies were a great example of how music could go beyond being just fun and become something transcendent and life-changing. During his folk revival time, Simon was interested in American roots music and came across the group. Musicologists say that he immediately recognized their superior vocal techniques and spiritual authenticity, and that their recordings became important listening for him as he learned how to write songs. Recording engineers who worked with Simon say that his love of the Dixie Hummingbirds affected how he arranged his vocals and how he delivered his emotions. Studio musicians talk about how he used their harmonic ideas and methods in secular settings to give his own compositions more spiritual meaning. When Simon asked the group to work with him on his solo project, he treated them like valued guests instead of hired musicians. The relationship became more personal. Concert promoters say he was truly thrilled to play with the Hummingbirds, showing the energy of a student learning from a recognized master. Simon has always had a lot of love for African American musical traditions and has worked hard to give credit where credit is due to the roots of American popular music. His love for the Dixie Hummingbirds showed that he knew that to write great songs, you need both professional skill and spiritual depth. Lessons that improved every part of his musical growth. To David Bowie. In Paul Simon's own work, he tried to reach the perfect balance between great poetry and new music, and Bob Dylan did just that. Dylan's innovative approach to lyrics and fearless artistic growth showed how important topics could be handled in popular music while still being emotionally powerful and selling well. Simon's love for Dylan began during the folk revival, when both of them were becoming well-known in Greenwich Village. Music writers write about how much they respected each other and sometimes worked together, saying that Dylan's complex lyrics pushed Simon to reach higher poetic goals. According to other songwriters of the time, Simon studied Dylan's work very carefully, examining his use of metaphors and story frameworks. Music critics say that Dylan can be heard in Simon's lyrics, which are getting more complicated, and his readiness to talk about social and political issues. When both artists helped each other advance their careers, the relationship got very personal. Simon praised Dylan's unwavering artistic vision and his ability to make poems sing. Insiders in the industry said they were real friends and admired each other, even though there were times when they were competing. Simon liked more than just Dylan's words, he also liked how brave he was in always trying new things with his music. Concert organizers saw Simon pay Dylan respectful attention while he performed, seeing Dylan as a peer and an inspiration in their shared quest for artistic greatness. This admiration for Dylan's bold creativity made Simon more open to trying out new musical styles and writing about tough topics in his songs. Dylan showed that popular music could be mentally challenging without losing its emotional power. Inspiration for Simon to work on more complex art projects throughout his career. A single Art Garfunkel. The most surprising fact is that Paul Simon's biggest musical love was Art Garfunkel, his longtime partner and sometimes rival. Even though they had problems and sometimes split up, Simon always said that his relationship with Garfunkel was what made him do his best work and produce their shared legacy. Simon's respect for Garfunkel began when they were kids and found that their musical skills complemented each other. A lot of music critics say that Garfunkel's clear voice complemented Simon's more earthy voice in a way that neither could have done on their own. According to recording engineers who worked with the pair, Simon had a lot of respect for Garfunkel's musical instincts, which could get frustrating when their artistic ideas were at odds with each other. Studio players say Simon would let Garfunkel arrange the vocals while still wanting to make all the decisions about writing and producing the songs. They worked together to make some of the most famous songs in music history, and Simon always said that their biggest hits needed both of their efforts. Music reviewers said that songs like "Bridge Over Troubled Water" showed how Simon's songwriting could be improved by Garfunkel's amazing vocals. People who worked in the music business saw Simon's real emotional investment in their relationship and said that their regular reunions showed the deep love that was hiding behind their working problems. Concert footage shows how well they get along and how much they respect each other's music, even when things were rough in their personal lives. This complicated love story shows that when there is a real and transformative musical link between two people, personal problems can be put aside. Simon's relationship with Garfunkel showed that the person who pushes you to go beyond your own limits and make something you couldn't do on your own can be the most important musical impact. Paul Simon's love of music led to a famous career based on learning and respect.